Welcome back to the Waterlad Podcast. I'm James Marshall, and as always, shout out to our partners, Pure Sports CBD. How good is this stuff? And Fortune Favours What a Brew. And head over to www.waterlad.com to receive a discount for either of those two products. Okay, today I pretty much have the perfect Waterlad guest. Firstly, he's an absolute lad. Secondly, he's had an incredible rugby career winning Premierships, Heineken Cups, World Cups. He's also captained his country, as well as representing the British and Irish Lions. But most importantly, he's used his profile to make a positive difference to this world with his foundation and charity work. It is the great lad himself, Lewis Moody. Welcome, Lewis. Thanks for coming on, lad.
Pleasure, mate. What an intro, bud. That has made me feel really special.
Mate, that's always the goal. Now you can start sharing your unbelievable journey. And look what I've been reading all last night, the great Mad Dog book, Lewis Moody. What a book. What a purchase.
I bet you got to do a lot of colouring in there, didn't you? There's a lot of pictures, a lot of colouring in, dot to dot.
Oh, the boys want me to read that every night. Oh, they love it. They love the Mad Dog book.
Oh, it's one of those, I wrote that, and it was just after the 2011 World Cup, which obviously wasn't a great success for us. And we were obviously there together afterwards, right? And but I remember writing that book, thinking, right, I want to be as honest as possible, because I don't want to do another book, because it took like a year, and you sit down, you go through everything, and it's, mate, I don't know what you're like, but I find it hard to remember, what happened last week, let alone what I did, 10 years ago in my career. So it took a long time to get this book together. And then I was like, I want to be really honest. And then when you put it out and you read it back for the first time, you press sort of go, and then you pause for a second and remember that your mum's going to read it, and some of the stories you wish you could sort of just take back. Why did I say that? But yeah, no, mate. Oh, don't read it to the kids.
It is a great book, though. Can you still buy it? Must have been #1 for ages, was it?
Mate, if we'd won the World Cup in 2011, it might have been. But no, because we got absolutely destroyed, not only on the pitch, but off the pitch. It did all right, but it was. I think you can find it in the if you're lucky, in the bargain basement now. Tends to be used a lot of kindling to start fires.
Well, maybe after this podcast and you've given them a wee snippet of your life, they can go back and repurchase that book, and you might see it back up on the charts again, because this podcast is massive.
Well, mate, I've been watching it from over here. I have been enjoying it. Obviously, global Jimmy Marr superstar and all that.
Anyway, you talked about your memory and struggling to remember for your book. An interesting thing that has come out recently is, I think your ex-teammate and mate, Stephen Thompson, is looking to sue World Rugby. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't know what it's been like over there or in the Southern Hemisphere, but over here there's been a super big push on all the concussion stuff over the last few years, and obviously we had all that with World Rugby, right? Was it Chris Nowinski, who's the American football guy that came over and was really pushing it hard. I think he was the guy that first broke it with the NFL, and there's been massive changes made, right? So which has all been good for the game, and sort of wishing that it had happened when I was playing. I might remember some more of my career, but so talking about Steve Thompson particularly, it was an Alex Popham who was a Welsh international as well. So those were the two main guys that came out, and I roomed with Tomo for a long time, top man, and I had no idea. Still, speak to him relatively frequently.
Yeah.
So I was surprised, man. It was a big shock, and I was very sad to hear that he'd been diagnosed with early onset dementia, essentially, which is what my dad just passed away from, and he'd had that for 10 years, but he was 78 rather than 42. So having seen what it does to the individual and then the impact it has on family and carers, so firstly just really upset for him, but where do you go from there? I listened to the RPA over here, so the Rugby Players Association, did a webinar on this, because there was a lot of hysteria in media and stuff at the time, and they had some scientists on there, which was great. People giving. There's a guy called Dr. Willie Stewart who's doing a lot of research into is it CTE, which is the stuff that you find in your brain, right? And when it gets bashed around. And he's doing a lot of research. So he was on, and there were a few other top doctors and clinicians on talking about it. And they said essentially that the risk of getting dementia in the normal population, I think, is really low at the minute. But he said the risk of getting dementia as a sports person is no different. Sure. So I suppose that was quite nice to hear, right? Because it is concerning. I genuinely, I had a lot of concussions, Jimmy. I know you avoided tackling like the plague, so you probably were fine. But
it's sweet.
Too skillful, mate. You're too skillful. Could never be caught. But yeah, man, I got banged up. I got banged up all the time. So as I know, a lot of players in my era did, and so you do sort of worry about it. Not in a way like that it hampers my life or anything, but it does, it crosses my mind every now and again. So I think it was quite a relief to listen to these, eminent professionals talk about the realities of the risks. And actually there's the information from what they were talking about was saying there's no greater risk at the minute from what they know for sports people to be any more prevalent to getting dementia. But they didn't say that obviously repeated concussions or bangs to the head isn't going to have an impact. Do
you feel like it's had a massive impact on your memory? Like obviously your memory is pretty shot. Do you think that's due to your rugby career?
Do you know, I sort of play around with it a bit with the whole memory thing because, I've always struggled to sort of remember stuff, and it's sometimes an easy way of, if you're losing track or if you need to take the piss out of yourself a bit for a minute just to get a bit of a laugh, it's an easy way of doing that, isn't it? But I have struggled with it on and off, but I couldn't say that it was definitely because of my rugby.
But you don't regret playing professional rugby, do you?
No, mate, not at all. Not at all. A lot of the guys, and Tomo included, came out and said that, he if he'd have known, he wouldn't have played. But it's not, and I'm sorry to hear that that's how he feels, but that's not the case for me, mate. I love the game. There are risks in everything you do, right? I knew there are risks in playing rugby. You get injured, you get banged in the head, all sorts can happen. But the life that it afforded me, the opportunities it created, and the things that it taught me, oh, mate, absolutely no. I have no regrets whatsoever. Yeah. I love the game. It's just one of the most awesome things I got to do during my life.
You tackled with your face a fair amount throughout your career. And obviously there's a game against Tonga where you had a couple of real brutal head knocks. Was that the worst concussions you had? And talk to me about that experience.
Mate, well, to be fair, there's a guy playing for Tonga called Nili Latu, who's a great player. Yeah. He came over and played for Newcastle over here for a while as well. And I'd been out of the team. Brian Ashton was the England coach at the time, and he didn't rate me very much. So I was sort of benching for the first 3 matches. That was my first start against Tonga. So desperate to impress, and flew out the blocks. Tried to charge down the fullback. And mate, my technique was whenever you boys like when we first met, right on the pitch, you're playing for Calvisano,
Ironi,
that's it, Ironi. Quality.
One of the biggest games of your career, wasn't it?
Yeah, mate. I remember Bryony calling me and saying, "Please don't hurt Jimmy. Please don't hurt James."
I think she was genuinely scared I was going to get hurt by you, because she said the same thing to me. She's like, "Oh, watch out for Lewis. He's a psycho." And I was like, "Don't you worry. He won't last at 80." And then about 20 into the game, you're hobbling off.
Oh, mate, I missed the Six Nations because of that bloody game. But yeah, and I didn't get near you either, which is really disappointing because when Bryce called me, I was like, right, okay, he's definitely getting it twice as hard. I didn't get anywhere near you. I don't think I made one tackle on you. No, that probably means that you just passed it a lot rather than run.
I don't think we had the ball, to be fair. It was about 60-0.
Yeah, mate, I scored one try in that game from a pushover from about 3 meters out. It was an absolute gem. What a beaut. One to remember. But no, mate, here, look, so that Tonga game, that was the first time post-match that I'd ever really genuinely appreciated what concussion was about. So I charged his kick down, got it completely right. Well, I didn't get it wrong. I got to him. I didn't get the ball, but I got his leg. His leg actually kicked my leading arm.
Yeah.
And my own hand then ended up going in my eye. So my thumb went in my eye, and I went blind. So no, what am I talking about? That was a totally different one. That was Gloucester. That was Parthby Gloucester. I tell you, my memory's fine, mate. Absolutely nothing wrong with it at this end. Tonga, that's it. 2007. So it was a charge down, but I got his knee right in the temple. I don't know who he was, but he was a Tongan fullback. And I was out cold on the floor. And I remember there was a young lad playing for us called Matthew Tate, who's a wonderful player. He was like 21 at the time. And I remember lying on the floor thinking, why is he talking so strange? Because he was saying my name like really slowly, like Mudos. That was my nickname, Mudos. And then I realised that I was actually lying on the floor, like not moving, and he was trying to help me up, literally. So I was out, and it was back then when concussion was not understood properly, and you had virtually no protocols. Any protocols you could work your way around, couldn't you? I think we had to do the hardest it ever got was you had to say the months of the year backwards. Which I'd struggled to do when not concussed, quite frankly. So, I mean, why they come on and ask me that? But yeah, basically, I just blagged my way out of it. Back then, you could just the decision was in the players' hands, right? And I just sort of pushed the dock off and go, mate, I'm fine. Let me back on. Ran around. Second half, end of the first half, nearly Latu. I got short ball off Johnny Wilkinson. And I got absolutely smoked in the head. So just came flying through. It was like chin and chest. Yeah. And I was out again. And the next day, so we won convincingly. I actually played a really good game. I don't recall any of it, but I played a really good game. And the next day, so the first real recognition and time, I sat back and went, okay, this is something that needs to be taken more seriously. We ended up going to Euro Disney. And we had like the day off. It was before, so I think it was the last game of the pool. I can't remember. So we were then building up to the quarterfinal, and we went on these roller coasters at Euro Disney. And I went on this thing called the Black Hole, and literally I got in. And Annie was like, "You probably shouldn't go on this, with those concussions." Yes, I was like, "No, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. I've never had a problem." Wow, mate, went on literally first drop. I was like that. Get me off! Get me off! Get me off! Oh, it was awful. My head was exploding, and I can laugh about it now, thankfully. But at the time, it was awful, and it made me look back and go. The worst bit about it was, but then I had to spend the rest of the day like following everyone around, all the lads and the girlfriends, essentially carrying the girls' handbags, because I couldn't do anything. But yeah, mate, it gave me a whole newfound respect for how you deal with concussion, right? And I am really glad that all the protocols are in place now, because the lads, you need to be looked after. Like, you don't know what impact that sort of stuff's going to have on you. So you asked me earlier, would I go back and change anything? We were operating with what we understood at the time. The medics were operating with what they understood at the time, and as a player, quite frankly, I didn't want to come off the pitch. Yeah. So I'm glad they had to change the rules to put the power in the medic's hand and the doctors, not the players.
Jeez, I can't believe you went on a roller coaster after a double head knock.
Yeah, man.
That is brutal.
Yeah, it's not my best decision.
Did you play in the quarterfinal the following week, or did you have a couple of weeks off at least?
No, mate. No, but played every game. So, so we started against Australia the following week. And again, all you had to do was pass the computer test, right? Which everyone. So I don't know whether you did it, Jimmy. Yeah. So you did like a base test prior to, let's say, the match. So you did it on Monday. Yeah. And then if you got concussion, you'd do a second test afterwards. But so, mate, if you passed that, then you were fine. But you could always, you could scam them, right? Because you could just do a really rubbish base test when you first did it.
And which is
pretty
did?
Much what all the players did. Yeah, mate. So it was, and when you look back, it's not cool. But that's just, again, it was what we operated in, and concussion was not treated like a big issue for whatever reason when we played, right? Yeah. So we didn't necessarily take it seriously, and we wanted to play. We didn't want to miss a game. It was a quarter-final of World Cup. Lucky, mate. I was lucky. I got to play in 3.
Yeah.
If you get to play in 1, the last thing you want to do is get a headbang and then miss the quarter-final. Obviously now we know it's different. Sort of Jack Noel of England, he missed the Premiership final and a Heineken Cup final because of a head knock. So now it's being well catered for, but not back then, mate.
If you knew what you knew now, would you have still tried to play that quarter final?
I probably would have done. Mate. I just love playing. I love playing. Like, I'm not, you are. I feel like you're a rugby thinker, right? You're a good analyst. You probably be an incredible coach. You love the sort of reading of the game, understanding it, and all that, the idiosyncrasies, the laws. I just loved playing.
Yeah.
I wasn't really that fussed about the laws. It's probably showed in my style of play and the number of penalties I gave away. But, yeah,
you were just mad, just loved it. How good. Anyway, well, let's go back to the start of your career. I know that most people will know a little bit of your career because they've read your book, but take us back to the young Lewis Moody. What was it like for you growing up?
Oh, mate, it was simple. I just, we had school. I found rugby when I was 5. So one of the lads, Matt Foster, was a guy that introduced me to it. And, rugby back then was full contact from the moment you played,
True.
which appealed to my my style of exuberance and enthusiasm. And plus, I was, as a kid, I was massive compared to the other kids, so it was significantly easier for me, I imagine.
It says in your book that you're a back, or did you just make that up because you forgot?
No, I was a centre. I was a centre until the year before I made my Premiership debut, and then they realised that I couldn't catch or pass or sidestep or anything.
Oh shit! Was it that long? I didn't realise you were back till that late.
Yeah, so I was playing school first team at centre, and then I went to the county trial. Trying to make it. So we have over here. Back then we had county. So you had school, club, county. Regional, and then you had like England schoolboys and what have you. So county was like the first step on the ladder for me, and I didn't get in at under 16, so I thought I'd definitely get in at under 18s. Didn't get in at I went to the trial, and thankfully one of my coaches, or 2 coaches, Brian Welford and Andy Wolstenholme, were 2 guys that were like, we should try him at flankers. And I got moved during this one game. And I have to admit, even for me, it was like an epiphany. It was like, wow, okay, this all of a sudden I'm just following the ball around and tackling people. This is like the best thing ever. And that was it, mate. So I was, from the age of 5 to 17, I was a centre and loved it. Just loved getting muddy, loved tackling, loved the whole team ethos, and grew up watching Leicester Tigers. Went to Oakham School. My first team coach was Ian Dosser-Smith, who I'm sure no one in New Zealand will remember, but he was a Leicester Tigers stalwart and legend, and he sort of nudged me off to Leicester when I finished school and said, "Go on, as an 18-year-old sort of kid, see how you get on." I weighed about 13 stone. Even back then in 1996, that was still pretty light for a back row.
Yeah.
I remember going into my first game. So played my first game for Leicester Tigers, thinking that, I had all the confidence, the bravado of, as a public school boy, come through the England schools. That from that county trial, I ended up playing England schools that year, and then played England schools, 21s and all that sort of stuff. And thought, wow, yeah, this is great. I'm going to show these boys how it's done. And mate, I was absolutely village. It was like, I felt like a schoolboy in it was like being a rag doll. Felt like a child, just getting picked up and thrown around. The worst bit about it was there was a guy called Dean Richards who was an England player and, of great renown at that point. And he was our captain and sort of a schoolboy hero of mine. Actually, I grew up watching him. He played in the 91 World Cup final against Australia. And he sort of gathered us all in, and it was like, right, lads, whatever you do, you keep hold of the ball. When that kickoff comes to us, you keep hold of it, we drive, get Joel Stransky was our fly off at the time.
Yeah.
You get the ball to Joel and he'll clear the lines and we'll get down the other end, put some pressure on, score some points. We were like 15-0 down in my first ever game for Leicester. So right. And I was listening as a schoolboy, like just in the huddle, there's like Martin Johnson, Joel Stransky, Rory Underwood, Dean Richards, who were like all my schoolboy heroes, like watching these guys playing World Cups. And I'm really not taking anything in. So the first kickoff came to me. And, Dean's like, keep hold of it, drive it, old school rugby. And came to me and I caught it. And I was pretty quick back then, Jimmy. And caught it, sidestep and ran off. And like there was a guy called Frano Bottiger. Do you remember Frano Bottiger? So league legend and union legend. And he was playing for Oral at the time. And as the sort of pitch opened up and I made a sidestep, I thought I was like going to go the length of the pitch and change the course of the game for my schoolboy heroes. Yeah. As I thought that, Frano Bottiger like scrag tackled me, and as I was going down, I thought, right, like Dino's going, keep hold of the ball, right, drive it, keep it, get it down the other end. Joel will kick it down the other end. We'll put pressure down there, get some points on the board. As I was getting scrag tackled by Frano Bottiger, I was thinking in my head, I was like, right, Martin Johnson's running a perfect line off my shoulder here. And I'm going to give what I thought was a lovely little flick out the back of my hand and watched it. Because I rolled around and watched it all the way until it hit Jono directly in the forehead, which, to be fair, was difficult to miss because he got a massive forehead. But, and the ball then bounced forward and I was like, oh, they picked up and scored under the post. So I was like, oh, no. And, in my head, I'm thinking, right, these, I'm sure everyone's cocked up before, they must have been made a mistake. I'm a young lad, first game. I'm sure they'll be supportive. Jono just literally looked over at me, like literally staring at me. I'm still on the floor, like picked me up by the scruff of the neck and said, I told you to hold on to the ball. And then other words that I probably won't use on here. But it's safe to say I didn't get to play again for about another year and a half until I'd learnt my lesson. Keep hold of the ball, don't ever try and pass it, basically was the lesson.
Well, that's brutal. But you were 18 years old when you made your debut. It's with all these legends. It's crazy, eh? And it was obviously a way more old school rugby environment back then. Such an intimidating environment for a kid like you. How'd you find the whole off-field side of the team?
Mate, as an 18-year-old, when you come into a group of men essentially like that, I found, it was tough. I loved it, don't get me wrong, I did love it, but it was intimidating, probably for all the right reasons, right? Because I felt nervous because these guys are all, I've grown up watching them. They're like my heroes. There were a couple of guys that were great. I had two mates. Well, so I had two mates. That sounds like I had obviously more than that in life, but at the time, just the two. There's a guy called Leon Lloyd who's one of my closest mates, and grew up playing together, went through all the county system, and we were in the squad together. But apart from us, that was pretty much it. The rest were the sort of seasoned old school that had come through the amateur era. That was the first full season of professional rugby. To me, it was an intimidating place, right? It was an intimidating place. You felt like you didn't speak until you were spoken to type thing, or you didn't speak until you'd earned your stripes. And, that was fine. You just cracked on. And I was always a pretty shy kid anyway, to be honest. And I just wanted my sport to do the talking. And eventually it did. University derailed me for a little bit during that first year. And I got caught up maybe enjoying myself rather too much and sidetracked from training and all that sort of stuff. But when I was late for my first appraisal, like player appraisal, we'd gone out the night before and I'd completely forgotten I had it as a naive 18, or it would have been 19 then, so it was the end of the season. Yeah. And my housemate got a phone call and he was like, Dean Richards is on the phone. Apparently you're supposed to be in a meeting. I was like, shit. And ran down the stairs. I'd left my car in town. And it's like a 10-minute drive to the training ground. And thankfully, my housemate had his car there, but he only had one leg because he had an accident as a kid. So his pedals were reversed. So the brake was the accelerator, and the accelerator was the brake. I mean, this sounds like a comedy sketch, all right? That was carnage. I was like, how am I going to drive it? So I was trying to get out. Oh man, it was a car crash waiting to happen. Don't know how I made it to training. I made it to training after like bunny hopping up the road for about, and I got there, walked in, and they just literally, as soon as I walked in, they went, get out, and made me sit outside for about 15 minutes. And you talk about old school rugby, mate. So this is old school rugby saved my career, essentially, as an 18-year-old, lost, naive schoolboy that was just enjoying himself and didn't understand what professional rugby was about. Yeah. So I sat outside. They said, come in. There was Joel Stransky, Dean Richards, and John Wells, who were the coaching staff at the time. And Joel Stransky actually asked, he was like, right, can you lift your top up? Because they've been talking about diet and nutrition. And obviously I'd not been adhering to that as a student. And I think Joel, wanted to impress on me the fact that I was essentially a flabby, teenager still. So I lifted my shirt up and running literally from my shoulder to my hip with 3 massive like stud marks.
Oh, sure.
And Wellesley just went, and that's the reason we're keeping you, lad. But that's the only reason. Right, God, thanks. Promise I'm going to get it right next year. Mate, but it was a good lesson. Like I was a public school boy. I'd gone from all the rules and regulations of school to suddenly being free out in the world and just embracing life. And I got it wrong that first year. I did too much partying, too much, enjoying myself and not focusing enough on being a sportsman. And even in my first England tour, which was 1998, so a year and a half later, I was still battling that mentality. I was trying to be professional, but I was also wanting to fit in and all that sort of stuff. So after that 98 season, I finally, put all that behind me and just focused on, playing the game and being a professional. But trying to find that balance when you were a young kid and the game was switching from amateur to professional was tricky.
And you obviously, you did it with success. You ended up playing over 200 games for Leicester Tigers and winning about 1,000 premierships and a fair bit of Heineken Cup success as well. Do you want to talk through any of those ones that stand out for you?
Well, mate, bizarrely, actually, the one I enjoyed the most probably was one I played 0 minutes in. I was on the bench in the Heineken Cup final, so the European final. So from 98 to 2002, we'd won 4 back-to-back Premiership titles. So we were unbeaten at Welford Road, which is the Tigers' home ground for 4 seasons. It was 4.5 years actually. It ended up being. And during all that success, and I had a big role to play in a lot of that. Sometimes I was in, sometimes I was out. We had guys like Josh Kronfeld come over and play in the back row. We had Neil Back, Martin Corrie, guys that are all world class players. So there was a huge amount of competition for place, and a lot of changing of place as well. So come the Heineken Cup final in 2001, I was on the bench, and I didn't get a single minute. But the build up to that had been we'd gone to the Heineken Cup final in '98. We'd won the league. We played it in Cardiff Arms Park, precursor to the Millennium Stadium, or now the Principality. We lost that to Brive, and we believed we were the best side in Europe for a long time, yet we weren't able to win the Heineken Cup. Bath won it in '98, and they couldn't get anywhere near us in the league at that time. So it was a real sort of monkey on the back. And Leicester's a real old school club, or it was then, in the best sense of the meaning of the word old school, in that everyone that was around the club had been a part of the club. They played, the coach and the chairman, the MD, the CEO, they'd all been former players. The kit man, the physio, the only guy that actually one of the physios was probably one of the only guys that hadn't actually been a player. So the whole backroom staff knew what it was about to play for the Tigers, and there was this just build up to this game was just massive. There was so much pressure on us, and we were so brilliant and through the year, but we hadn't been able to nail the Heineken Cup. And we get to the final, we're playing Stade Francais in France, like in the Stade de France, not at a neutral venue. We're basically playing it in their home stadium. Yeah. And we, I think that got our ankles up a bit, but we were just desperate to prove that we should be up there and recognised as one of the best sides in Europe. And although I didn't play a single minute in that game, being a part of that squad on that day and how much it meant. I've still got the ball up on the shelf up behind me from that match day, and it's got all the players, well, the entire squad, but all the backroom stuff. So the guys like Peter Wheeler, Pete Tom, John Duggan, Cliff Shepherd, who was a kit man for donkey's years, sadly no longer with us, and he was great because he would give Austin Healy stick all the time because he was a winger as well, and Austin never scored as many tries as him, so he'd do stuff like not put his shirt out on time or hide it, and it was just brilliant. But having something like that was so important to the entire club, even though I didn't play a single minute, that's what made the game for me. Being a part of something with a club that I loved, with people that I loved playing for, that made you feel special, that made you feel a part of something more than just a game. It just felt massive. And I'm sure, Jimmy, as a born and bred Kiwi man, you guys seem to and understand that better than anyone. And I think as a club at Leicester, we really knew what that meant, and it was a real special time to play the game. I absolutely loved those years at the Tigers, and the parties after were pretty enjoyable as well.
I bet. But that's a pretty powerful culture that you've obviously developed at Leicester, because most teams are try and replicate that. Some teams can replicate, but not every team can, because people put themselves first. But then you obviously went on to become captain of Leicester.
Mate, I didn't. I was captain of Leicester for only a couple of games, so I was never club captain, and that's actually something I really regretted during my career, because I did go on to become England captain, and because I think it was just because I was inherently shy, and I genuinely believed that I wasn't going to be good enough as a captain. That when I was offered it, or when it was suggested to me, or I was just inherently nervous. I had that fear of failure thing, right? I was worried about doing it, even though I'd captained all my schoolboy sides and representative sides. For whatever reason, it made me nervous. I did it on a handful of occasions for Leicester, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And one of my biggest regrets, Jimmy, is getting to captain England, as for the last 2 seasons of my international career was just incredible. But you also learn so much. And I remember listening to Richie McCaw talk about his lessons from 2007, and how it helped him grow and develop and understand himself better as a captain. And I think for me, I had exactly the same lessons taught to me, and that I learned through failing many times over again and making poor decisions, and not delegating enough, taking on too much responsibility. Therefore, your form dips, and all these sorts of things that you sort of learn. Yeah. And I got to a point where at 32, I was like, do you know what? I now feel like I'm ready to be a captain. But my time had come and gone in an England shirt, and I knew it as well. I knew there were better players than me around, and I had to put my hands up and say, look, it's time for me to step away, and you guys need to take over. But my regret is I wish I'd had the confidence as a kid to take that responsibility on earlier, and not doubt myself, right? There's so much great stuff going on in the world about mental health and well-being, and and kindness and confidence. And actually, you need that. You need to give yourself some self-love. You need to have that inner belief, which I think we all do as athletes, right? You have an inner belief in your own personal ability, I think, but around certain elements it can maybe wane. And for me, it was definitely around that leadership piece, is worrying whether I'd be good enough. But I'm glad I did it. Those 2 years were a roller coaster ride with England, of beating Australia in Australia, winning the Six Nations, and then obviously, getting kicked out of the World Cup in 2011 by France. So it was, and all the fallout from that. So that was the lows, but it was still an enjoyable experience.
Well, let's get to your England career. Obviously, a very successful career with England, the national side. Start with your debut. How was it going into the England camp for the first few times, and how was that very first game in the Red Rose jersey?
Mate, you sound like you're slightly jealous. It's like you wish you'd filled it on yourself.
I've still got one of your jerseys. I wear it most nights.
In bed. Oh, I bet Bridie loves that.
She makes me wear it.
So, mate, I've given one to all the family. This is probably at the point we should say, the fact that you're actually a relative is incredible. But I have given you're not the only family relative to get a jersey. Johnny, our other brother-in-law, has also got one. But I can't remember what you asked me, mate. What did you ask me?
How was your
first
English
game?
debut? Yeah.
It was terrifying, mate. It was terrifying. Actually, going into camp for the first time was terrifying. The only easy bit, when you're going into a new environment, with the best players in the country, you just want to impress, right? You want to get everything right. And it was Clive at that time was building a really unique squad, a unique team, managers, and and I was lucky that in 2001 I sort of dropped in just at the right time when all of this was gradually coming together. This big plan was being hatched, but it was terrifying. I was lucky in the fact that I had a load of Leicester mates there, that I played with week in, week out. That was the godsend. But your first camp is terrifying. You just desperately want to impress. And my first cap actually turned out to be not that scary. My first cap at Twickenham was terrifying. I remember feeling sick before the game, and Johnny just coming up to me, "Don't worry, mate, you'll be fine." And I actually ran onto the pitch, and the smoke sort of blinded me momentarily. I ended up running onto they have all the big flags out on the pitch. I ended up running out onto one of the flags. I was like, where'd they go? Where'd everyone go? But my first cap was against Canada it was literally in a field, like in the back of some farmyard, essentially, in Vancouver.
Oh, really?
So you have great visions of making your debut at wherever, Cardiff Arms, Twickenham, but for me it was literally a farmer's field, and there were there might have been 500 people watching. We beat Canada. And it was actually a great tour, mate. I loved it. And it was the first time I felt like a professional. There was a lot of the other lads were still, midweek drinks nights, or, if the lads that weren't involved, obviously, in the match were going out midweek and all that sort of jazz. But it was the first time I was, I felt like a proper dedicated professional. I was focused on what I wanted to do. I was up early in the pool, recovery, eating all the boiled chicken and the oily fish and, all the good stuff that was happening at that time. I actually felt it was great. And my Leicester coach was the England coach at the time, forwards coach, John Wells. That was pretty cool because I played my first game at Oral, the one I told you about, where I had a shocker with him, and I had a lot of respect for him. He was a hard-nosed, old-school coach, but he was brilliant because he told you straight, right? A lot of coaches sort of beat around the bush if you get dropped or aren't honest with you. And he was brilliant. Like, if you got dropped, I would just say, "Mate, I think I'm playing well. Why haven't you picked me?" He'd be like, "Well, you don't do this as good as the guy that I picked ahead of you." I was like, "Okay, that's fair enough. Yeah. I'm gonna have to go away and work on that then."
Yeah.
So he gave you good, valid reasons and stuff that you could go away and actually improve on and say, "Look, I'm doing this better now. Please pick me." But so to be presenting my shirt by Wellesley was pretty cool the night before the game, and it still meant. The fact that it was on a farmer's field in the middle of Vancouver, it still meant as much to me as it would have done if it had been Twickenham Stadium. It was super special. And I talked about Leon Lloyd, one of my best mates that I grew up with. He was also on that tour, so I made my debut with him. And I've still got a picture on the wall of us two after that match, which was pretty cool back in 2001.
How good. And then obviously you went pretty well over the next couple of years and and England itself went pretty well as well. Made the World Cup, 2003 World Cup. You were the winners. Want to talk about that tournament and the lead up to that?
Mate, it was, as I said, that sort of 2001, coming into that England team at that time, and there were so many wonderful world-class players. You had Lawrence Dallaglio, Richard Hill, Neil Back was the starting back row that I was trying to break into. Johnny Wilkinson, Matt Dawson, Phil Vickery, Jason Leonard. The team was just proliferated with world-class players, and Kieran Barry, and even in multiple players in multiple positions, which is what you need to be a world-class competitive side. And it was, I have to admit, it was a real. I enjoyed my rugby at that point. I enjoyed going to camp. It was hard, as it should be. We worked brutally hard because we knew we had 2 goals, was being the fittest team in the world and being the best prepared. We set about being the fittest, obviously, and working with all the strength and conditioning coaches and putting in the extra hours. So when you finished training at the club, you were doing more. It wasn't about being fitter than the guy at your club or the guy that's pushing you at England. It was about being fitter than essentially Richie McCaw for me, which was a big ask because he was a hugely fit human being. But I don't think I ever quite achieved that. but I was working towards it. But we all had that. We all had that mindset, right? It was just everyone was pushing everyone, and that competitive spirit, that competition for place, just pushed everyone. And there was no moment where you could rest on your laurels and feel like your place was guaranteed, no matter who you were. So it was a cool period of time, and we went through all the games. The bit that really stands out in my mind there, right, is there's 2 bits. One is that Clive, the manager, Clive Woodward, and he's whether he's your cup of tea or not as a manager or whatever, he's gone and done. He's been brilliant. At the time, he was brilliant as well. What I felt Clive recognised really quickly was that his strengths and his weaknesses he understood straight away, and that maybe he wasn't the world-class coach that he wanted to be. And although he did do, a lot of the coaching, he got in a world-class coaching side. He realised he was a world-class manager, essentially. Yeah. And then he set about building this incredible team around him, this support network, this, backroom staff, that it meant if we got to a World Cup final, there was going to be no reason we could look back and go, well, if we just had that, we would have won. We had everything was catered for. We covered every eventuality. He thought, he was just a great thinker. He would try anything. If he thought it would work and it would make 1% difference, he would try it. So we had this great plan, in terms of being the fittest team in the world and best prepared. And we set 4 years to achieve that. And come the World Cup, we were the number 1 side in the world. We'd beaten all the Southern Hemisphere sides at home, which was huge. It's not something that happens, feels like ever in this country, and to do it at home and then do it away as well that same summer was enormous. So we went in with huge confidence. But the best, so I talked about 2 bits. One was Clive and, him creating that strategy, the culture, and understanding his strengths and weaknesses and getting the whole team to buy into it. And the second was that when we realised the whole plan had come to fruition. We were the best side in the world going to the World Cup, having been knocked out by South Africa in the quarterfinal in '99 to 900 drop goals from Yanni de Beer. It was a classic game. Clive and the coaches knew we could win the World Cup ultimately. As I'm sure this is what it's like to be a Kiwi going to a World Cup. Right? You're number 1 side in the world every time, and it shows you how hard it is to win because you guys haven't won it every time. But so we knew we were good enough to be in the final. Yeah. And it was going to be our second final. So the coaches went away and looked at all other, was it Super Bowl, World Cup football finals, cricket finals, anything that, was as an important match as this was going to be, and tried to find something within it that, that would link across all of them. And invariably what they decided and what the outcome was from their research was that it normally came down to the last minute or one big play. Rarely was a final, no matter who was in it, massively one-sided. Of course it was occasionally, but so we knew that it was going to come down to that last minute and a half. Doesn't matter who we played. The fact that we played Australia, and actually on the day we were much better than them, it was still one of the closest games ever. And we rehearsed for the last 2-3 months of training for that World Cup because we were in such a good spot. We rehearsed every possible outcome that we would need in the last minute and a half of a game to win, and not just sort of go through it, just passing it through the hands, going through the motions against live opposition for like 20 minutes at a time, absolutely battering each other until we got it right. And we got it wrong lots and lots of times. But so come the World Cup final in 2003, and Johnny Wilkinson's obviously, everyone in the world knows that we're going to, in the last minute and a half, we're going to try and kick a drop goal, and get Johnny in the, even the Aussies knew that. We'd rehearsed it a million times. We knew what was going to be needed, and there was no pressure. I came off the bench as a 24-year-old, very exuberantly enthusiastic, and also absolutely crapping himself because the game was so close.
Yeah.
The 2003 final, if you remember it, like it's seesawed, right?
Yeah.
So Elton Flatley and Johnny Wilkinson kicked both their points. They were machines that day. And I was on the bench just, I don't know whether you've ever felt this, Jimmy, but when you're on the bench, right, it's tough. You just want to get on. You want to make a difference. And then if the game's close, you're sort of, well, in my head, I was like, the Gremlins. Do I want to be the person that gives away the penalty and costs England the World Cup?
Yeah.
But, mate, once you're on the pitch, you cross that white line. It's all history. It was an incredible experience. That World Cup was incredible. Being that 4-year journey to that World Cup, well, 3 years for me from 2001, was the singly most enjoyable experience I had on a rugby pitch with all those individuals. And
you came on in that final and made a couple of big plays from memory too.
Oh, mate, I don't know whether they were big plays. You do your bit, don't you? You come on.
So
I was, but it was. I was just literally doing my job, man. I was so enthusiastic. I wanted to be on from the first minute, so I had a lot of energy to exude in the 10 minutes or whatever it was that I was on. I made a lot of tackles, first play, the line-out's overthrown. I'm supposed to lift at the back. I recognise it's going over the top. Ball lands in my hands and you're into the match straight away. So it was perfect.
Huge
play. so big, yeah. I mean, 3 side steps, a handoff, and then, goose step down the wing. It was 5 yards from the try line. No, that's not what happened, sadly. But I had one involvement that was my sort of trademark, which was trying to get to that charge down. And we knew, so Lawrence gave away a penalty, which allowed Elton Flatley to kick to put us level with a minute and a half left. And under the post, Jono was just like, look, lads, we know what we're doing. We'll kick the ball long, Moodos. You'll put pressure on Rogers, and hopefully he'll scuff it. Because of that, we'll go to our pattern, which was zigzag, and that was about just working the middle of the pitch to get Johnny in a position for the drop goal. And I put a bit of pressure on Rogers, and he scuffed it. And what you don't know from that moment on is from the line out that ensued after that. So we had a line out. Matt Dawson made a big break, and Johnny ends up kicking the drop goal. Because everyone in the world knew that we were trying to get Johnny in a position to kick a drop goal. Yeah. We needed to get out. So if the Aussies congregated around the breakdown to try and, charge him down, put pressure on him, then Johnny needed to get out. So from that line out, I had to hold my width on the right-hand side of the pitch. And I was Johnny's get out for that crossfield kick. And if you've got the video, you've got the VHS, then you can put the tape in, and you'll see that there's a blonde-haired young flanker stood on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, like waving his arms frantically. It's like I saw my own World Cup moment of glory, and I was a little bit disappointed when Johnny slotted the drop goal. I thought, you selfish bugger.
Oh, that's classic.
All worked out nicely.
And then how were the celebrations after that? Winning a World Cup's obviously the pinnacle of the game. Must have been surreal.
Mate, it was surreal. Do you know what? No one, like you guys with the Hurricanes, won the Super Rugby title, right? So you felt similar. I think whenever you win anything, there's that immediate exuberation, right? The whistle goes, the instant euphoria, that natural release, of all the pressure and anxiety and build up of, dreams and aspirations and all that sort of stuff. And then when you come off the pitch, having, done the laps of honour and paraded the cup and, sung "We Are the Champions" or whatever it is that you sing. I think you guys have better songs in New Zealand. We just have champions. That's it. That's all people sing when they win. But no one prepares you for what the feeling is like when you go back inside. Like, so when you've done all that and, the crowd sort of died down, you go into the change room. I felt this like real, like numbness. It was just like, it felt really weird. Like you sort of felt like we should all be dancing and, dropping out some shapes, and there should be a boombox on. And we didn't have any of that. It was, we just sort of sat there. There was, someone brought in some beers, and we're having a beer and was chatting to Martin Corrie and Jono, and I just felt weird. I didn't know how to feel. And after every big win we had during my career, I felt exactly the same. I found it really hard to feel inspired or, excited after that initial exuberance. And I don't know whether it's because you exert so much into winning in those big games that actually all of a sudden you've just burnt yourself out. yeah, so I always found it quite hard to go out after a game. My next day, like it tended to be, an early start. So after the World Cup final, we myself, Steve Thompson, Joe Worsley, Ben Cohen went out the front door once we got through the small crowd that was there. Wandered down to the beach, hired some surfboards, had about 3 or 4 gin and tonics before we went out, like 9:30 in the morning. And mate, it was brilliant because we didn't have all the crazy media attention because obviously the Aussies were so desperately disappointed they lost. It was like it never happened.
Yeah.
We had the tight nucleus of England fans that were still there, but so we could just enjoy ourselves as a unit. And we had a good old day. I think Mike Tyndall met his future wife Zara that night, the night of the World Cup final. Jace Leonard and a few of the other boys ended up getting brought home in a police car because they couldn't find any taxis. It was the usual stuff. It was nothing. It wasn't like Tom Brady. I watched a video of Tom Brady winning the Super Bowl with the Bucks recently. Did you see that? So what is he doing? That's the sort of stuff you can do, right? When you've won 7, was it 6 Super Bowls?
Shit, they go.
Yeah.
Finals are won by small moments. You've practiced it endlessly over the last 4 years, and then you're in another final, this time against South Africa.
Yeah.
But you obviously come out on the wrong side this time. Talk to me about that one.
Mate, well, this was like a whole different kettle of fish, this World Cup for us, because after 2003, Clive left. Andy Robinson took over, who's a brilliant coach, incredible forwards coach. But essentially inherited the same setup, same staff, minus a lot of the retired players. So Jason, Jono, heaps of boys were injured.
Yeah.
And it was a really difficult period after that World Cup. And so we came into 2007. Andy Robinson was released from his contract 6 months before we got to the World Cup. So everything that had been built over 3 years was suddenly gone. Right. Brian Ashton came in, who was a completely different thinker. Robbo was very similar to Clive. Brian was very much, play what you see, guys, which is great, and refreshing and brilliant for a lot of players. But when you're a side that's still got the nucleus of all those players that have played 4 years before, and a lot of guys that have gone through that system, which was very structured, defensively and in attack. Yes, there was, when it was open play, it was play we see, but there was a lot of structure to it. So we really struggled, I think, with the way that Brian wanted to play. So we came into that tournament, mate. I think we finished 4th or 5th in the Six Nations. We had no real form. Prior to 2003, we'd won the Grand Slam. We'd beaten all the Southern Hemisphere sides. We were number 1 in the world. I think we were like, 8, 9, 10th in the world at this point.
True.
And I don't think, we all fiercely believed that we were better than we were playing. But, we had a new coach, things weren't gelling. And after, our second game, we narrowly beat America in the first game. Phil Vickery, our tour captain, was banned from tripping one of the American players in that game. So it wasn't exactly a great start to the tournament. We then went to play South Africa without our captain the following week, and we lost 36-0, which was like a record defeat
to Africa.
Yeah. And so we're at that point we were sort of like, it's all over, lads. A lot of the guys had already sort of packed their bags, feeling like it was time to go home. But we had a meeting afterwards, and it was one of those honesty sessions, right, that you have not always in times of crisis. Sometimes when you're on the sometimes when you're on the front foot. But it was perfect. It just brought everyone together. There was a lot of finger pointing. There was a lot of we need to do this better. And ultimately, we just came to a decision that we need to focus on one simple thing: game in, game out. And we need to play better than we are, because we're letting ourselves down at this time. And the coaches bought into it. We literally focused on one area of the game. That was it. That was all our week was built around. So against Australia in the quarterfinal, they'd smashed everyone. They played Wales, Fiji, and someone else, so they hadn't had particularly tough games, but they were annihilating them with amazing plays. But John Wells noticed that they weren't having to commit anyone to the ruck to win the ball. So our simple focus was just smash the rucks, every ruck. And we did. And, we beat Australia by a point. Now, no one expected us to do that. We were the only people that believed we could do it. And we probably didn't deserve to do it. But we just had this, sheer bloody mindedness as a group of players that knew we were underperforming and knew we could do better. We just had to take control of it. And it worked. We ended up beating France in their home stadium in the semi-final. Josh Lucy scored early on. Good bounce of the ball, gets past. I can't remember it.
I was going to say your memory's on fire if you remember that, but just let
yeah, I can picture him, but I can't remember his name. But yeah, mate. So all of a sudden, so we lose 36-0 to South Africa in the pool game. All of a sudden, we're in a World Cup final playing South Africa. It's like, so I think in many ways, the journeys were totally different, but in many ways, our 2007 winning the World Cup. We'd won the World Cup by getting to the final. For us, we'd gone through so much getting there. The chaos before, the change of coaches, the disarray when we were in camp, and the crosswires with players and coaches, and it, for whatever reason, it just came together in those last three games. That singular focus. The French game was just applying pressure to Boxis, who'd come in as a young fly half, and in every game he'd kicked 10, 12, 15, 20 points from drop kicks, penalties. So we just refused to allow him to kick the ball. So my job was singularly to put pressure on his kicking game, which I absolutely loved. That was great fun for me. So I did that all day. Didn't touch the ball or pass or anything. Just chase the fly half, Jimmy.
And you were still suffering you would have still been suffering from your head knocks because this was the same time?
Yeah, so the Aussie game came directly after the Tonga match, yeah. Mate, like I said, I got through I generally felt no ill effects from...
Oh, true.
Yeah, I was lucky to get picked off the bench to play that Tonga game. I was then lucky to make it through that Tonga game alive, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And then to come out the back of it and pass all the tests to allow me to play, that was really cool. And Jason Robinson, who tore his hamstring in the South Africa game where we got smashed, he thought his tournament was over and he was stuck on 49 caps. So the only way he would get to 50 is if we made it to the semi-final or the final. Yeah. And so that was pretty cool to be able to run out with him on his 50th cap. Sure. Because he was a special player, man. And I've watched some great New Zealand players over the years. Glenn Osborne, I remember when he came on the scene, he was just scintillating. But Jason Robinson, mate,
next level,
playing with him, he was just so class, mate. He was so class.
Was he one of the most gifted players you've played with?
So he wasn't the most naturally skillful player.
Yeah.
Like, he was unbelievably powerful. He could literally change direction at full speed, but not like over half a meter. He'd move like it seemed like 15 meters away. He's just, he was just incredible. You just can't teach that. It was just something that was so exciting to watch and to be a part of when you were in the team with him. You just knew he could find space anywhere. Yeah. But the most talented guy I ever witnessed play the game that I've ever played with was Jordan Murphy. Yeah, he was Irish international. Played with him for a long time at Leicester, and he's a good mate of mine. But he played Gaelic football, right? And so the Gaelic football, if the ball's moving towards you, you can't pick it up with your hands. You have to kick it into your hands. So it's, like a little chip kick, which for you, mate, you're probably like, that sounds really easy. But for me, that would be like I'd fall over 25 times before I got to it, just thinking about it. But, mate, I remember I played a game, whoever it was against at Leicester, at Welford Road. They kicked the ball out of their 22, and so their winger could run onto it, which he was at pace. And Jordan was sprinting flat out to the ball from fullback in the opposite direction. And as you're getting there, normally you're going to make a decision, right? You'll slow down, you're going to drop on the ball, you'll fly hack it through, you'll slow down because the other guy's going to beat you to it, then you're going to have to tackle him, whatever it might be. He did not break, sprint, flat out. This ball's bouncing towards him, flat out with the winger chasing him. He just chipped it at full speed into his hands, chipped the fullback and scored in the corner. It was Yeah, it was just one of those things. It probably doesn't sound great now, but if you like, even if you see it now, it's an incredible piece of skill.
That does.
And he could just do crazy stuff, man. I love playing. I love being surrounded by people that are infinitely more talented than me, right? Because it tends to make you look much better as a player because you have to do a lot less.
Oh, 100%. Did you find the higher the level you went up, the sort of easier your role was?
100%, because everyone's doing their job properly.
Yeah.
You know, it's just they're focused on doing their job as best as they can, and they're normally doing it really, really well. So therefore, you're just only having to concentrate on doing your bit of the game as well as you can. Right? So it can't be any easier. Whereas sometimes with the club or anywhere else, you've
got to make those offloads.
You've got to make up the other stuff. I know. I take the piss out of myself, but I love playing the game. Like, and when I say the game, I love tackling, I love chasing people down, I love pressuring the opposition, but I love to play as well. And like as a kid, I played so much sevens. Sevens was my life. I loved it because you had so much open space. I wasn't a gifted sidestepper, but I was pretty quick as a kid, and I had pretty good hands. So I loved playing the game. Another one of my regrets was that I think probably because I played for a club like Leicester for so long, that towards the latter stages of my career, you got very nervous about actually trying to do offloads and all that sort of stuff, because the meetings on Monday, the amount of abuse you get if something went wrong, it almost put you off. And I have to admit that frustrates me, and I resent that a little bit.
Imagine the player you would have been if you played Super Rugby.
Oh, mate, imagine, Dan Carter, I was a centre, mate. You never know. Could have. No, I think I was destined to be a flanker. That's fine, mate, and I loved it.
Yeah, for sure. And then let's skip another 4 years. Your World Cup, this time you're captain of England, coming to the mighty New Zealand to take on the World Cup again. Talk me through that.
Well, again, mate, a totally different kettle of fish, right? So we come in. Actually, we were in really good form. We had a good run of games. We had a load of young guys coming through: Ben Youngs, Dylan Hartley, Courtney Laws, to name a few.
Yeah.
And we'd won the Six Nations. We'd beaten Australia on our summer tour away from home. So we were building nicely. I don't think any of us thought we were the finished article. I don't think any. I felt we could reach a final, but I knew a lot of stuff would have to fall into place for us to do so. But I knew we had the capability of doing well. We'd train in camp, and ultimately, obviously, in that World Cup, we ended up losing to France in the quarterfinal, a team that we shouldn't have lost against, because we were much better. And I'd been classic. I was recovering from prior to the tournament, playing against Ione. Ione?
Yeah,
I can't remember. I can't pronounce it. Ione. That's it. I did my knee, right? So I missed the Six Nations in the build-up. And I think I came back for the last game. I got fit for the final warm-up game just prior to the World Cup. Playing that tweaked my knee a little bit again. So my first game wasn't the first match of the World Cup, even though I was captain of the side. It was the second game, so Mike Tyndall was the captain of that first game. So I was actually, in my head, in the warm-up to the Georgia match, which was my first start, I felt like I tweaked my knee again. And I went down on it, and I was like, man, I've just spent 2 months getting back to this position. The coach has put all their faith in me. The physios have worked enormously hard. And in the moment before my first game in the World Cup as captain, I thought my knee had gone again. And thankfully it hadn't. It was just one of those, sometimes when you come back from an injury, it just feels a bit glitchy. And it was, once I got into the game, it was fine. But we spent a lot of the build up to that World Cup also talking about New Zealand and the pressure cooker that it is as a rugby environment, because, so much of the media spotlight is on rugby, right? So as England players coming to New Zealand, the media attention was going to be on us as well. Mike Tyndall had obviously just married into the royal family as well, so that was creating big news. And like in any campaign, you spend 2 to 3 months building up to the tournament. So you're away from family, you're working hard, all that jazz, and you always target a window during as an England team, this is what we did. We targeted a window, normally after an easier game. So after the Georgia, I think it was the Georgia game. But we were going to have an evening off. We'd have training off the next day, and then we'd be able to go out and let our hair down.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. And, sadly, a few people got caught in awkward situations, and the media were just on us. So despite the fact that we'd spent 3 months going, right, guys, it's going to be a media hotspot. The attention's all going to be on us. You've got to be super careful. You got to, whatever you do. We literally repeated it. Even when we got there, we repeated it. It felt like too much to the point where you just feel like you're saying it right. And to still come unstuck because of something that we brought on ourselves, I think is the biggest frustration for me for that World Cup, because ultimately what transpired off the back of that, rightly or wrongly, ultimately, a few players, we all went out, we had a team meal, we had a few drinks. There were lots of nations doing it on the same night, just in the bars around the corner.
Yeah.
And, for whatever reason, we have a couple of guys that ended up getting too far and that were, high profile players. So the media attention is on them. And that was it. All of a sudden you spend the next 3-4 weeks talking about just those moments. And then once one moment like that happens in a campaign, anything else that happens that may or may not, like the borderline stuff that I think there's something with Johnny and the balls, whether he was writing on the balls or something, there was all sorts of stuff that then grew and grew and grew. And it was painful, mate. And as a captain, as a relatively new captain, so I'd done the season before as England captain, it was suddenly a lot to burden, because you're not actually worrying about playing the game. You're having conversations with players about what's happened the night before, how they're going to address the media, and it's just ongoing. And there was more reports coming in. And it was hard work, and we had to sit down and as captain, you have to also put your hands up afterwards and go, there was something I clearly got wrong, because I thought we'd prepared well. I thought we had a good squad that knew what they were doing. There was a good balance of old boys and young guys, and everything in between. And we were playing well. And we allowed external factors to totally derail us. And I think that's what frustrates me. And, when you're the captain, the coach, you've got to put your hand up and go, okay, look, there's clearly stuff we should have seen coming and been able to avoid. And I think probably coming down on some of the players earlier prior to the tour, some of the misdemeanors, stuff that wasn't a big deal, but maybe in the light of day, you'd actually gone, okay, crack down on that hard when it happened. It sets a tone then for the rest. If you let one person get away with it, other stuff comes off the back of it. And the biggest disappointment then off the World Cup was, okay, that's all happened, but we then play France in the quarterfinal, a team that we could beat when we knew we could beat. And it's not that they were a bad side. They're obviously a very good side with wonderful players. But we played, we had the capability and we had the players to win that game, and we didn't. And, mate, it was tough coming back to this country after that. It's tough. And if you're a captain, it's even tougher, because the blame, is pointed and landing on your shoulders, and you have to, you have to take it.
Did you feel like the English media was harder on the England side or on you as captain?
No, I don't think so. Like, we know what the media is like anywhere in the world. America, England, New Zealand, Australia. And we knew it was coming. It wasn't like it was a surprise. I think the fallout from it was there was all sorts of other stuff that happened here. They had this. What was it called? It was like a survey, it was supposed to be an anonymous survey, people wanted to find out what had been going on. So everyone had the ability to do this anonymous survey. Anonymous survey then gets leaked to the press by the people in charge of the RFU at the time. I mean, it was just, mate, it's just some horrible people involved doing stuff that was only for them to look good,
Yeah.
It was a really tough time. Yeah. So, mate, for me personally, it was hard, but I don't blame the media. The media, they, it's their job, right? It's, if you allow them the opportunity, if you give them the stories, then, if they're out there creating stories, then it's different. But, we gave them stuff to write about. So I got no qualms about that.
It's good. And that was your last game in the England jersey, eh?
It was, mate. And I was bitter about that for a long time. Because actually we didn't touch upon Leicester and my departure from Leicester, which is my schoolboy club.
Was that before the World Cup?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, so I left the year before the World Cup. Well, I say left. I was released from Leicester, so I played at Leicester for 14 years. I was 30, but I'd gone from 14 to 30 through the junior side and all the way through. I envisaged playing my time out at Leicester. So to walk in on a meeting and be told that I was surplus to requirements, whilst in the year that I was picked to be England captain, was pretty hard pill to swallow. And I felt really bitter about that for a long time. And, when I say a long time, I mean well into my retirement. So I had that literally the year before the World Cup. So that's still lingering in my head. And I've moved to Bath to play, which I love. I still live in Bath now. I love this place. But, the rugby wasn't quite the same. And then, to finish your England career, so a decade playing for England, in a World Cup campaign that ended as it did, was also pretty disappointing and a hard thing to swallow. But I stepped away from international rugby, as I was always going to do after that World Cup, because I think, as I said earlier, Jimmy, there were better players coming through at that time. I was still a quality player. I was still playing well, and I thought there was still at least 3 or 4 more years left in the tank yet. But I wanted to focus my attention on playing for the club side that had put their faith in me, which was Bath. And then literally I came back from that World Cup, had a week or two off, and the first game I played was against Worcester away, and obviously again, so you got all the media attention. So Lewis Moody, England captain, coming back after a disastrous World Cup campaign. He's got a point to prove. Blah blah blah. All this, which I did. I did have a point to prove. I went for a tap tackle on the fullback, literally just a diving tap tackle, and landed with my arm outstretched with my weak shoulder. And so I'd had 3 shoulder reconstructions, and I knew instantly. That was it. I just knew. And I tried to play the rest of the game with one arm, essentially. Got knocked out twice. Probably, made it infinitely worse for my team, because I was essentially not functioning correctly. And with about 20 minutes to go, I was thankfully taken off. And that was my last game of rugby. So, you don't get to write the endings of your careers. I had the most enjoyable experience of my life playing rugby. It was awesome, but you don't get to write the happy ending and going out on lifting the World Cup as England captain. I got it a very different way, but it doesn't make my career any less enjoyable, and I don't look back now with any regret or bitterness anymore. That's all long gone. I've been retired nearly 10 years, and I have a family and kids that are now enjoying their sport, and I'm watching them, and as you said at the start, putting my passions into areas of life that now interest me and have a huge amount of meaning and purpose for me.
Yeah, well, let's get to that. You've obviously set up the Lewis Moody Foundation. You're doing all sorts of good work around brain tumours, helping people with brain tumours, getting the awareness out there. Do you want to talk to me about what inspired you to set up that foundation and what you're actually doing?
Sure, man. So we met. Actually, so it was 2 weeks after I retired. So I pulled the pin on. My shoulder finally gave in. I had to press the button. I think we did it on Twitter, actually. Like literally press the button on the computer, and that was it. Wake up the next day. What do you do? And I got a letter in the post from a guy called Graham Stark, and he lived up in Sheffield. And it said, "Look, my son's got a rare form of cancer. Would you mind helping him out? Coming up, doing a training session." Maybe bring some kit up so they can auction, so he can send his mates off. So we did, went up, met Joss, Leo and the family, took a training session, took a load of kit, they auctioned it off. It was one of those occasions, actually, you meet some people in your life, and there are moments, you call sliding doors or whatever, that happen that just have a huge impact on you. And this did. So I kept in touch with Joss and Graham for the next year. I got another phone call from Graham. Well, we've been speaking all the time, but a phone call to say that the lads were struggling, Leo and Joss. Leo was Joss's brother. Was there anything I could do to sort of alleviate the boredom and monotony of dealing with illness? So I took them to a game at Twickenham, so we had hospitality, pre-game hospitality, all the good stuff, right? Chose a team that I knew we'd beat, so beat Wales. And we lost them at the weekend, right? So I can say that. And we had a great day. So we took them down in the change rooms afterwards, all the stuff that former England captains, have access to, which I feel incredibly lucky and privileged to have done. So I took him down to the change rooms. You meet the current team, players, go up by the match afterwards, hospitality, the RFU were brilliant. And, about 2 days afterwards, so Joss has been there and chatting to the England players. He's got signed photos, memorabilia. Graham, his dad, called me it was a week and a half later and just said, mate, this was perfect. Like the lads elated, dancing around the house. Joss on the day was in a wheelchair because his illness was, was at that stage. He was struggling, but he was just elated off the back of it. Photographs, memorabilia, flags, scarves, everything all around the house. Yeah. And then at the end of the phone call, he said, thank you so much, and just said, I'm really sorry, but Joss lost his battle with cancer yesterday, and for me that was just a massive moment in my life. It was like, I got to know this guy over a year and a half, got to know him well. He's a young lad. He was only 16. He was an incredible sportsman, athlete, rugby player, and all of a sudden his life's been taken from him. And I think me and Annie, my wife, just wanted to focus all our attention on doing something super positive. So we set up a charity in Joss's memory. So I would call it Joss Riley Stark Foundation, but I was directed differently at the time to use my sort of name to, for good. So we went with the Lewis Moody Foundation, and so ever since then, mate, we've spent 5-6 years. We actually launched it in 2014, so it took a bit of time to get everything going, and we've raised nearly over 2 million. All the stuff that we do, so how we raise money for brain tumours is by taking people on crazy challenges to places. They're not always crazy, but a lot of them are. The first one was to the North Pole. That was pretty epic. We then did 1,000 miles across Vietnam and Cambodia. We then did coast to coast Costa Rica. It's like crocodiles. We were in the kayaks and bikes. They're just mental trips. And we finished our last trip. Obviously, the rest have been cancelled this year and postponed because of COVID. But we finished. Thankfully, we got back from the South Pole at the end of January, so just in time to get it in. And it's been a wonderful sort of 5 years. The current situation has changed everything massively. Charities have been, and ours has been hit. Fundraising has been decimated. We've been able to do virtual stuff. So thankfully, the light is at the end of the tunnel. The vaccines and everything are in place. So we've got some other challenges and some different means of raising money. But if anyone wants to look at it, because in the UK anyway, brain tumours are the biggest cancer killer of under 40s and children, bar none. But until a few years ago, only received 2% of all funding. So around the world, I think America are leading the way with brain tumours. But still more needs to be done. And there's always good stuff that comes out of New Zealand in terms of research and knowledge as well. So, it's not a UK based thing. It's a global thing. So the more awareness we can raise and the more we can do for brain tumours, the better. But the Lewis Moody Foundation.org is the website if anyone wants to have a look at what we do. It's when you talk about retirement and finding your next thing, I was super lucky that letter fell through my door, because the irony of it is that them asking me for help essentially helped me more than they could ever have imagined, because it gave me a purpose post playing that I otherwise wouldn't have found. And I feel really lucky to have met Graham, and we're just still in contact with him. I was chatting to him just the other day, so it's that's really cool,
mate. You're doing some amazing things, and yes, any Waterlad listeners out there, please go and check that out and donate if you can. I know people with young kids, I mean, the idea of them getting sick, and especially something like a brain tumour, man, it just breaks your heart even thinking about it, So it's incredible what you're doing in that space.
Cheers, Jimmy. Yeah, and mate, if anyone listening, I'd say come and join us on the Lions tour. But at the minute, it doesn't look like, who knows where that's going to be, if it's going to happen. I really hope it does happen, because, even if it's not in South Africa, but it would be a real tragedy if that doesn't. But safety first and all that, I suppose, right?
Yeah. Is that the next tour for the charity, is it?
Well, so we've got an Amazon tour as well, but that's been postponed to 2020. But the Lions obviously is, you can't. Well, we can postpone it obviously if they move it till next year, which is not a problem. But if they move the challenge, if they move the tour somewhere else, then the challenge will have to be cancelled. But I'd still love to see the Lions to go ahead either way, as long as it's safe.
So, how do you get involved in one of those things? Like obviously, all these experience, like going to the South Pole and doing the Amazon and all that, there's unbelievable experiences. Can anyone just come in and what do? Pay to join it? Do you?
Yeah, mate. Yeah. So if you go on the website, there's a whole host of pages, but if you go to the challenge page, you'll see what's coming up, and you literally just click on it. So all of our challenges, they're not for superhumans, far from it. It's just about getting from A to B, from start to finish. No time. There's no, you're not trying to set any records. We're just trying to get from A to B and raise as much money as we can in the way, and hope that everyone enjoys it. It's going to be hard and it's going to push you. But, we have guys that have been sat behind a desk for 20 years and are nearly 20 stone. And we've got super fit triathletes and all sorts, obviously, and everything in between. Sure. But it's epic, mate. And you'll have to come, Jim, one day. I've got something lined up for you.
What have you got? I hope it doesn't involve walking because my hip's fucked.
Oh, yeah, good point. Got a nice marathon run for you. That'll be all right, won't it?
I did have a look at them. I was like, a lot of them had treks and stuff. I was like, I have to wait till he gets some sort of like wheelchair or biking one.
Yeah, just have to get you in a pushchair, mate. You'll be fine.
you can
push
pull
Jimmy up
me
the
in
hill.
a sled to the North Pole.
Be good training. Yeah, man.
Mate, but that's unreal, and really appreciate you coming on the podcast. I know it's getting late over there, so I'll wrap that up. I had so much I wanted to talk to you about. You've obviously had an amazing career. Loved following your journey since I became your brother-in-law, or even before that. I remember playing as your character on Rugby 08 back in the day, and you were a good tackler. You weren't you didn't have a star, but I remember you being a real good tackler, and I think good at the charge down.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, mate, I remember, do you know what, the one joyous moment I had from 2011 World Cup was coming off the pitch afterwards when I was pretty desolate about the whole game, and I could hear someone shouting my name really loud and really excitedly. I was like, fair play, thank you. Someone really loves me. And then I realised it was you. I was like, oh, bollocks.
Mate,
it must have been bad.
I remember getting on the partners bus after that game, and oh my gosh, it was like everyone was in tears. Obviously, I was gutted for you, but I didn't really care, and I was pumped. And I was in the wrong environment on that bus.
You were pumped. I remember even I think we went back to the hotel afterwards. You were, yeah, that was a good time, mate. I'm glad you were there. It certainly lightened my mood.
Oh, mate. Well, anyway, hopefully we can catch up sometime soon once this COVID stuff finishes. And yeah, like I said, I'd love to jump on one of those charity things, or if I can help out in any way. You're doing amazing things in that space. I'd love to be able to help out. So let me know. But really appreciate you giving up your time, mate. Hell of a yarn, hell of a journey. What a lad.
Pleasure, mate. Take care, and good luck with the podcast. I genuinely love it. I've been listening over here, so keep it going.
Cheers.
Hopefully, mate. I've not put everyone to sleep.
Nah, it's bloody good.